Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. My name's Ryan.
And I'm Rosie.
How are you doing tonight, Rosie?
I am great. How are you, Ryan?
I'm good. Probably better than you. You got called into work last minute today, so it was
So sad.
kind of a off day, would you say?
That's just such a defeating feeling. I really wasn't expecting to work today. But
I know.
such is life.
You handled it well.
Handled it with a little bit of grace.
Enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you are taking the lead for us this week.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you got?
All right, folks. This is going to be a tough one. I want to put out a very real trigger warning with this episode. It's a hard one. It was a hard one to write, and it's going to be a harder one to talk about. So this one is going to be very explicit in the nature of the abuse that this person suffered through. And I'm not going to get into the grittiest details, but we definitely do talk about some of it because I want to be real and, I don't want to hide anything.
So basically, listener beware.
Yeah.
At the top of the episode here.
Exactly. This is not one to have on in the kitchen while you're making dinner with kids doing homework in the background.
Okay.
All right. So today we are talking about Takoda Collins. Dakota was born on December 18th, 2008 in Wisconsin, USA. His parents were Robin Collins and Al Muhatan McLean. Now, things seemed really rough from the start for baby Dakota. On November 12th, 2009, Robin Collins, his mother, confessed to police that she was abusing Dakota and lost custody of her baby and was on probation. Dakota
She just went and confessed?
I think she was having a lot of side problems with drugs and alcohol.
Oh.
And just needed some help. So Dakota was not even 1 year old yet when this happened. Now, a woman named Anita Brenson, a family friend, took Dakota home at 11 months old and cared for him. Anita and her fiance were hoping to adopt Dakota, but sadly this didn't work out for them. And Dakota's mother, Robin, tried to clean up her own act, would come often, visit Dakota, but all of a sudden Al Muhatan, which we'll now be calling Al, Dakota's father, he showed absolutely no interest in his son and was never around or visiting. And Dakota's grandmother, Kelly, also had a huge role in Dakota's life when he was young and while he was in the foster care of Anita. She recalls how happy Dakota was as a baby and how much fun it was to go over and take her grandson home for weekends. Kelly also tried to adopt Dakota, but she was told that she already had too much on her plate. She had 3 other grandchildren that she was taking care of, and she worked a full-time job.
Yeah, that would be a lot. So
in 2011, when Dakota was 3 years old, Robin was sent to prison, his mother, and this was due to her probation being revoked for drug use. So
what? Oh, did she violate her probation terms or something?
Yeah.
Oh. Excuse me.
So really quick, we're going to talk about Al Muhatan McLean, Dakota's father, and his background before he reappeared in Dakota's life. He has a really sketchy track record. In the early 2010s, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of disorderly conduct, including strangulation and suffocation while he was in Wisconsin, plus 2 counts of bail jumping. One of these was in April 2012. Al had started choking and hitting a man that he believed had taken his phone. It was a very strange event.
Just at a bar or something?
I don't know any of the details, but I can't imagine it would be somebody he knew, or it must have been at a bar or a public place where he just had this mix-up. There are also some counts of illegally carrying a concealed weapon mixed in, but these were dismissed. Again, couldn't find much details about it. So what we can gather, though, is that Al seems a little skeevy.
Had a short fuse.
Yeah. Now, randomly, it seems that Al took a DNA test to prove that Dakota was even his child, And when the test came back positive, he decided to take Dakota out of the care of Anita and her fiance. Around July of 2013, Dakota's father was rewarded temporary full custody. Robin was fearful of Al and very concerned that he would take Dakota out of Wisconsin. So on October 21st, Robin asked the courts by letter if Al could be prevented from taking their son out of the state. So remember, she's like dealing with a lot of her own problems at this point. And she did make mistakes, especially with the abuse that she caused Dakota, but she was trying to make some positive steps.
Okay.
She claimed that Al's treatment of Dakota was under investigation by child welfare officials in Wisconsin. And I could be off, but it seemed like Al was threatening Robin, especially with the threat of taking their son out of the state and using it as some kind of control tactic. Because obviously there was some really real concern.
Right.
But on October 23rd, just 2 days later, the court awarded Al permanent sole custody of Takoda Collins. So,
why?
Exactly. Why did they not read the letter that Robin had just sent?
Was it because of her past? I mean, they both had a pretty rough past, so.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
There's gonna be a lot of whys, and obviously, like, you can tell this is kind of a grim outline, even from the start.
Mm-hmm.
But telling the court, hey, this guy's actions are under investigation. Can you please not let him take my son out of the state? And then awarding him full custody is just really strange. So only 3 days later, after this event, Al was accused of abusing his new fiancée, Amanda. The story was that Al began hitting her head with a pipe, then dragging her by her hair to a car, continuing to punch her before putting her inside the car, and then the two of them driving away. This event was recorded, but nothing happened. Charges were dismissed by the prosecutor. So again, just another example.
So he just got away with it.
Yeah.
Like it was nothing.
He gets away with a lot. It's like he's a slippery eel. Like he just can't be grabbed onto. In early 2014, Al got permission from a judge and moved Dakota from Wisconsin to Union City, Tennessee. Exactly what Robin asked not to happen. Robin wrote another letter to the courts. She was really concerned for her son's safety.
How did the judge prove that? Approve that request? Like, especially with those accusations that were so recent?
Right.
Anyway.
On February 26th, Robin wrote in her letter, quote, "He ripped him out of school and left. I have no idea what's going on. Without CPS involved and any information, I'm not even sure how he is." So, I mean, I don't know how much more like black and white she can get in this letter. Like, she literally doesn't know what's going on with her son. She doesn't know why they left or anything. No details.
I wonder if the decisions were because in the past she actually had abused the kid, and there up to this point there was no child abuse from the father, was there?
No, not at this point.
Not recorded, at least.
Just adult abuse.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe that had an impact on the custody,
right?
Because she was on record as abusing.
Yeah, it could have. No, I can't find anything about Al and Amanda, which is Al's then fiance, in their time with Dakota in Tennessee. But what we do know is not even a year later, when they moved to Tennessee, on July 30th, 2014, Al filed with the Wisconsin court his intent to take his son and move him to Pennsylvania. So a lot of moving around here.
Yeah.
How and why was there going to be such a big move again? And why wasn't this questioned more by the courts? It's so strange.
Hmm.
In addition to this, Robin signed a notarized letter saying that she agreed to the move. Now, the scary thing is that Robin also sent a handwritten letter a few days later saying that she was intensely pressured and bullied by Al to sign that notarized note.
Okay.
So again, the court got this letter and they decided not to take it seriously. Maybe they thought she was lying about it. Nothing happened after they saw the second letter. Now, because of certain privacy laws, it's not known if Child Protective Services were playing any kind of role in Dakota's case at this time. The Wisconsin Department of Children and Families would neither confirm or deny whether Dakota had ever truly been in the system. So another thing to keep in mind. 4 months before Dakota's 6th birthday, he was again uprooted and brought to Dayton, Ohio. So Dakota, Amanda, and Al didn't go to Pennsylvania after all. Instead, they moved from Tennessee to Ohio.
So they kind of made a circle?
Mm-hmm.
So they went from Wisconsin to Tennessee, Pennsylvania, then Ohio?
They said they were going to go to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
But instead, they just went to Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
Dakota started his first day of school at Horace Mann Elementary on August 18th, 2014. So Al did get the court's permission to move to Pennsylvania, but all of a sudden he decided that he didn't want to. So he thought he didn't really need the permission to go to Ohio since he already had it for Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Very strange. Dakota's mother at this point, Robin, only has visitation rights for her son. So she's not being... I mean, that just seems so unfair to me because he has such a past, but I know that she also has done some really terrible things.
Yeah. The sad part is you can't, as a judge or anyone making the decisions for it, you can't foresee what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, the only information they have is that she had been abusive in the past.
Right.
And even though the father was also abusive, it was never toward Dakota.
Mm-hmm. No, 2 months later, after being in Dayton, Ohio, Amanda Hines, who was Al's fiance, purchased a home for the family, which consists of Al, Dakota, Amanda's sister named Jennifer Ebert, and a 9-year-old boy who was Al McLean's baby brother. This was a weird tidbit, and I don't know much about this 9-year-old kid, but we can only assume that he has a story of his own. Apparently his mom was in jail, but nobody really knew for sure if she was or not. And he lived with his aunt for most of his life, but there was some alleged abuse, and the boy had some bruises to show for it. So they brought him over to Al's house and referred to him as Dakota's brother.
Okay.
Now, Jennifer, who was Amanda's sister, had some mental health issues and was just grateful to have a place to live with her sister. Amanda said that Jennifer wasn't able to care for herself, and Amanda and Al's relationship also seemed dysfunctional at best. The two of them feed off of each other very negatively, but Amanda was trying to make it work by buying this house and providing a place to live for everybody that was involved with the situation. She contributed financially by working at Walgreens, usually from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. And while she was working, Al and Jennifer would watch the children.
Okay.
On February 19th, 2016, the Montgomery County Children's Services went to Amanda's home to do a welfare check. There were some worries of abuse concerning the 9-year-old boy. When the police went to the door, nobody answered, and that was the extent of this welfare check.
Well, so why were they worried about abuse? Like, did they get a call from a neighbor? Or?
I believe it was somebody at the school.
Oh, okay. But they just went there, didn't find anyone, and then moved on?
Yeah, called it good.
Followed up?
Now, in the following months, things seemed to be only getting worse. Between March and June of 2016, Amanda called the police at least 3 times about Al. First, she called saying that Al was drunk and being aggressive. He was refusing to leave the house, and she just didn't know how to handle it. The police advised her of the eviction process in response. So not super helpful.
What?
On another call to the police, Amanda was crying hysterically, telling the dispatcher that Al hit her and again wouldn't leave the house. The officers went to the home, but no charges were pressed. Then in June, Amanda calls to plead with the police to come right away. When the police get there, Al is drunk with a neighbor, and the two of them are getting very violent. Again, no one is arrested when Amanda calls the police. It's just like, what? Don't you want somebody to be arrested if you're making these calls over and over and over again? I don't know. It's hard because I'm only seeing this as the person writing the podcast and not as somebody who was there. But to a third-party person, it seems very frustrating.
Well, you'd think there would be reasons that this is happening.
Right.
And that you should look into it further.
Right. Then in late July, Al calls the Dayton police to report that he was being assaulted by the woman of the house. He ended up calling several times, and eventually the police came to end the situation. And you guess what happens?
Nothing.
Right. Nobody is taken into custody. So the police calls are made almost every week at this point, if not every other week. On the 2nd of August, a woman who was assaulted by Al earlier in the month files a civil protection order against McLean.
Earlier in the month?
Yeah.
So there was more.
Right. The protection order was also dismissed because the incident didn't meet the threshold for that type of particular order. Don't know any more details. I wish I did. So he's not keeping it in the house. He's like getting aggressive again outside.
Seems like kind of a menace to society with all of this stuff coming up.
Mm-hmm. Then things got so bad that Dakota's brother ran away that same year in August, that same month in August. He was eventually found, and he told police that his dad forced him to do squats while holding a backpack full of heavy objects as punishment. If he was to drop the backpack or fall over, he'd be beat. The authorities told Child Protective Services, and the police were told that they made a referral. The police attempted to go over to the house and check things out, but because of some pit bulls on the property, they gave up and decided not to go back after that. So this was like another welfare check.
The police gave up because there were dogs?
Yeah.
Okay.
One interesting...
I haven't heard that one before.
Right. An interesting thing is that the police noticed that there were cameras set up, not only on the outside of the house, but on the inside. They can see through the windows. They asked Al about them, and just to see if they could like see any abuse or, weird stuff going on around the home. But Al said that they didn't record anything. They were only there to scare off trespassers.
Gotcha. Can I adjust this really quick?
Oh, is that better?
So people can see your face.
Oh.
All right, you're good.
After this, calls to the police seemed to calm down until July 29th, 2017. Amanda called in to say that random people whom she didn't know were yelling and threatening her. An officer goes over to the house and is able to calm the situation. It turns out that neighbors were furious over a grass cutting disagreement. So I'm thinking that maybe Al and Amanda and Jennifer weren't the best at keeping up the yard, and the neighbors were upset about it, and they got into another argument. Finally, on May 11th, 2018, teachers at Takoda school say that something is wrong, and they go to the Montgomery County Children's Services and request a welfare check because they're seeing signs of child abuse for Dakota, and they're worried about his safety. Police again go to the house and knock at the door, only to find no response. And it's just, the police are there so often, and they know that children are inside. You would think that something would have been, some more effort would be put into this.
This is like that case that you talked about over on Patreon, where stuff just kept happening around this one person.
Yeah.
What was her name again? And, like, she just kept getting away with it.
Belle.
Yeah, Belle Gunnis.
Al must have been home, but he was hiding, or he just realized that people were suspicious about Dakota. Because after this call, even though nobody answered the door, Dakota never goes back to school.
Oh.
The school officials claim that they aren't sure what day was the last day Dakota went to school, but it must have been between May 12th and 24th. Now, again, I'm like, what? You aren't sure?
Gap.
Yeah, how do you not know which day was your student's last? Like, don't you take attendance?
Yeah. That's weird.
It just, does anybody, like, care about this child? I mean, people are trying to call CPS, but not to have these records is very strange to me.
Yeah, that is. That doesn't seem like real. That's weird.
So after Dakota is taken out of school, he's formally enrolled in homeschool on July 31st. Another huge red flag. Because of the school system being concerned about his well-being and then him being suspiciously taken out of school, you would think that when they enrolled him in under a homeschooling program, that people would wonder why. Why all of a sudden?
Was it a legit homeschooling program, or was it like Turpin case where the dad was the principal?
I mean, homeschool can be so, it's such
lax.
So I think they just like took him out saying we are now homeschooling him. Al and Amanda claimed that the reason they wanted to homeschool Dakota was because he had such bad behavioral issues, and they were expecting him to be kicked out of school any day. Al said that his son was, quote, talking crazy. Now, teachers claimed that he would come to school smelling of feces and urine, and even though Al claimed that Dakota would constantly soil himself, Dakota was completely self-sufficient while he was at school. He went to the bathroom by himself. He was a normal kid, but...
So the dad blamed him, like he just can't handle going to the bathroom, and
having all these behavioral problems.
And yet at school, he doesn't have any of those.
Right. Teachers also noticed that Dakota would come to school with haircuts that were, quote, off-putting, like intentionally terrible haircuts. Al would call the school almost daily looking for reports of bad behavior from the teachers. The school board said they called CPS at least 17 times, expressing worry that Dakota was being abused at home.
Seriously?
That's what they said.
Okay. Then how is nothing happening if that's true?
That's the question. In November, 2 calls were made to the police. The first call was about an argument over allowing a friend to park in front of the house. Believe it or not, the police actually responded to this call. Nobody was arrested, but again...
over such a minor thing?
Yeah.
They were like... They took it more seriously than accusations of abuse?
Right. That's what it seems like. Then on the 18th, Dakota was the reason for the next call to dispatchers. Amanda and Al claimed that Dakota was being unruly, and they wanted him taken away to the Juvenile Justice Center.
What?
Yeah.
How old was he at this point?
Let's see here. I think he was about 8.
What? And they want him... They think, like, you can just call the police on your kid and have them taken to juvie?
Yeah, and this wasn't the first time that Al brought it up either. He talked about how terrible his behavior was all the time, but he never tried to do anything about it. Instead, he always thought that just dropping him off at juvie was the way to go. Like, constantly used that as a threat. Okay, so...
What?
He wasn't 8. Dakota was 9 at this time.
Okay.
But he was actually put in the police car. Like, the police were going to take him somewhere, and it's like, again, he's finally... Even if the police were like, yeah, we're going to take him to juvie, put that aside. He's in a safe place. I mean, he can hopefully try to talk to the police officers.
Right.
But after he's in the car for just a few minutes, Al says he actually doesn't want to press charges anymore. And that he's going to take Dakota to the Kettering Hospital.
He wanted to press charges on his 9-year-old son.
Yeah. And he's going to take him to the hospital instead. Why is he taking him to the hospital?
Wait, so once Dakota's in the back of the police car, Alan all of a sudden is like, never mind, give me him back.
Yeah.
And no questions came up.
Apparently not. But the Kettering, it's either catering or Kettering. I think it's pronounced Kettering Hospital. The officials there said that Dakota was never brought in.
Okay. How, with all of the past calls coming up about this house, and if the school is actually telling the truth about all the calls they put in, how could they not have like taken a few moments alone with Dakota and asked some questions, or like did a little bit more investigation?
The only thing I can think of is like they're extremely overworked. They're extremely sick of coming to this house all the time.
What year was this?
2000. That call 2019.
Okay. Wow.
Or I guess that call was late 2018. This is the next thing I'm going to talk about is 2019.
Okay.
Months later, on May 6th, 2019, Robin filed a motion for contempt order in the Wisconsin court. So I had no idea what this meant, but motion for contempt is something you would file if you are a parent with a divorced spouse who isn't obeying a court order. So the motion asks the court to hold a hearing where the other parent has to explain why they're not following court orders.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right? In her motion, she writes, quote, Mr. McLean has never brought Dakota to see me since he left the state. I have spoken to him once on the phone in 4 years, end quote. Now, a week later, the Wisconsin court decided to dismiss Robin's motion. They told her that since Dakota wasn't living in Wisconsin and was in Ohio, the case was in the jurisdiction of that state.
Okay. What part of Wisconsin, you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Didn't all this get settled, like, in Wisconsin, though? Like, the original court orders? Or were they across states?
What do you mean?
Like, when they first set up the custody arrangement and with visitation?
Right. But now that Dakota's not living there, it's not their problem. It's pretty much what I'm hearing. So I just can't imagine how hopeless and frustrated Robin must have felt at this time.
But you're right. Like, these government agencies, police, the courts, everyone is overworked and underappreciated. And, like, that's why all these government agencies do such a terrible job at these things, is they're not properly funded or appreciated or, you know,
right,
cared for, paid. I mean, it's such a complex issue, but still, like, you would hope that someone would be able to see the signs and say something. You know, like we started saying when we started this podcast, if you see something, say something. We've already talked about, but all these visits to the house and all these weird things, and then the mom, and I'm sure the Wisconsin courts didn't communicate with the Ohio courts about the mom's requests, but still, it's like, all this stuff's happening and no one's communicating.
Right.
Or noticing something wrong.
Well, Robin was very frustrated, as we can imagine, but she didn't stop there. She decided to call the Dayton, Ohio police station on the 14th and told them that she believed her son was being abused by his father. I'm hoping that we can play some of the 911 call.
Regional dispatch.
Hi, I need to speak with somebody about doing a welfare check on my son, who I believe is in danger right now.
Okay, at what address?
1934 Kensington Drive.
Okay, repeat that address for me once again.
1934 Kensington Drive. And I don't know how you guys do things or how it works or anything, but I believe that his father is abusing him and hurting him, and that he's too scared to tell anybody because his father won't let him talk to anybody. He's pulled him out of school. So if you guys need my permission, I'm giving you guys full permission to pull him to the side and speak with him, that he's supposed to bring him back to the...
So she's spelling it out like this is what could be going on. Please do something about this.
Exactly.
State 4 times a year. I'm supposed to have phone conversations with him once a week, talk to his schooling, and talk to his doctors. He has not abided by the court order in 4 years. I did not know where he was living because he was supposed to be living in Erie, Pennsylvania. Thank God that he caught a drunk driving in Dayton, Ohio, and now I have his address. I've been trying to work with him to talk to my son, and he gave me a bunch of things that are very concerning. He locked him in his room. He tried to jump out a window. He sent him to school in a diaper. He pulled him out of school. He whipped him with a belt. Just a bunch of stuff that's very concerning to me.
Okay. How old is your son?
He's 10. He'll be 11 in December.
What's his name?
His name is Takoda, Takoda.
And his last name?
Is Collins.
Okay. And you think that he's actively abusing him right now?
Yes, I think he is, yes.
Okay.
I definitely do. Just the way that he's talking to him on the phone, telling him how angry he is with him and how if I don't come and get him, something's going to happen and he's going to take him to a group home and drop him off, and how when he acts up, how he disciplines him with a belt and he'll lock him in the room, and just very demeaning and very vulgar. I don't really know if he's telling the truth or not, but even if he's not, I would feel much better knowing that a police officer pulled my son to the side and talked to him one-on-one to make sure that nothing is going on. He won't let me talk to him. When he does let me talk to him, he stands over him on the phone and tells him what to say. I spoke with him one time in the last 4 years, and that was 2 days ago.
And what's the father's name?
His name is Al, A-L, and his last name is McLean, M-C-L-E-A-N.
Okay, and do you know what Al's date of birth is?
One time in the last 4 years?
This is where we can stop, I think.
That's insane.
Yeah, I think she said it so well. I didn't want to just say what she said because has so much emotion in her call. Like, she's so fed up with what's been going on.
And she's trying so hard to, like, spell it out. Like, please, just do this.
And did you hear the only reason why she knew where Dakota was living?
Because of the drunk driving?
Yeah. Drunk driving charge.
That's so sad. She was disconnected from her son that much. One time in 4 years.
Mm-hmm. So the police went to Dakota's home and checked in on him and reported back that he seemed to be well taken care for. There was no confirmed record of child services being contacted on 10-year-old Dakota's behalf at this time. Months passed without any calls to the police, which is a pretty big deal for this family. Months passed without any more word from Dakota's mom. Then, on December 13th, 2019, Al called the police, saying that his son was unresponsive. Takoda Collins died at the Dayton Children's Hospital. His body was covered from head to toe in bruises and cuts. One doctor said that the wounds Takoda had on his body were similar to those who would have been in a severe car crash. The autopsy showed that there were rib fractures on both sides of Dakota's body and liver damage from blunt force trauma he had endured. He died from blunt force trauma and compression asphyxia from submersion in water from a bathtub. Dakota was 15 days away from turning 11 years old. Now we're going to talk more about what happened to Dakota. First, I want to talk about that day. At the hospital, Al McLean becomes unruly, according to police. He was making loud, pounding sounds in the holding room. They described it as metal on concrete noises. When they went to check on him, he was holding a chair in a defensive manner as if he was going to throw it at the authorities. The officers wrestled McLean to the ground, trying to detain him, and McLean ended up with a cut lip Because of this injury, they had to bring him to a different hospital to get checked out. And the doctor could hear him talking to himself saying, "I didn't beat his N-word ass that bad today." That's what he was saying to himself over and over.
Are you kidding me? With all those injuries, how the heck could he claim that? And not that bad today? That just incriminates him even more. Like, how bad is it usually then, if this isn't that bad to you?
I know. It's not going to get any better from here. Again, I think it's crucial to say that at the time of his death...
Please tell me, like, so more details come out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think it's just crazy that Child Protective Services had no open case on Takoda Collins. With all of the red flags and all the calls that they supposedly gotten from the school, the police got from Robin, his mother, there wasn't even an open case.
This could have been prevented. Like, there were so many times that this could have been prevented.
So we're going to talk a little bit about what happened to Takoda. And this is where I guess I would say is a real warning for people if that you can't stomach some of the abuse that we're going to talk about.
He would have been better off in juvie.
Yeah, he would have. In that moment where he was in the back of a police car could have been a complete turning point in his life. Since the time Takoda was taken out of school and homeschooled, this child was forced to live in a locked attic. Takoda was naked, starved, and tortured on a daily basis. Not only was this attic locked, it was also under camera surveillance 24/7. He was forced to stand in punishment poses and watched on the cameras to make sure that he was complying. If he broke one of the poses or did something wrong, he was beaten instantly. One of these poses was having Takoda cross his legs and bend over for hours. Takoda's own father raped him numerous times, some of these times by using a broken leg of a chair. Now, all the while, Amanda Hines and her sister Jennifer did absolutely nothing.
So that was the woman living with Al, or were they married? Or?
Fiance and the fiance's sister.
What? How could you? I mean, it's so obvious. If he's locked up for that long, like, there's no way they didn't know what was going on. But then, at the same time, it's like, we know he was abusive towards women, too. So it makes you wonder what was going on there. But still.
We'll get to Al or Amanda and Jennifer in a minute. Just another example of the terrifying torture Al made his son go through was he would pour hot sauce on his child's anus, claiming it was the only way to get him to stop pooping everywhere.
What?
How cruel he was.
That's... Ugh.
Now, when police went inside the home to investigate what was really happening inside that house, the bedroom that Al and Amanda claimed was Takoda's wasn't Takoda's at all. There were no clothes for a 10-year-old. Everything inside the room looked to be for a toddler, which I guess was actually for McLean's other brother that was living there. All of a sudden, there's a new tidbit in the story that a 3-year-old was also living in that house. When the authorities went to the attic door, they had to get through a padlock to go up the stairs. Al and Amanda said that the attic was never used except for the dogs, but police found Dakota's urine and feces on the floor and in buckets. They also found a tarp and a dirty lawn chair that was Dakota's bed. No blankets or sheets.
Lawn chair?
There were no lights in the attic, and Dakota was only allowed downstairs when the 3-year-old was sleeping. Now, the rest of the house was dirty and chaotic, completely disorganized. But one thing that really stood out to the police officers was on the living room wall. There was a collage of family photos, but not one of them had Dakota in them. So now we'll talk a little bit about Amanda, Al, and Jennifer's story for what happened.
Real quick before we do that, this kind of reminds me of the Robbie Wayne story we did a long time ago. I think like episode 21. Somewhere around there. But that one kid became the target and became the black sheep outcast and was just... Ugh. Anyway, I don't want to interrupt you any longer. It's just... This one's rough.
I know. So Amanda was questioned, and she initially said that on the day Dakota died, she had woken up around 1 p.m. She got her sister and heard Dakota in the bathtub. She didn't think anything of it and left to go do some errands in her pajamas. When she got back, she saw that police cars were surrounding the house. She asked Al what was happening, and he told her that Dakota was unresponsive. Amanda told authorities that she barely saw Dakota, like ever. She would sleep in, she would start her shift at Walgreens, which was 2 to 11. And when she got home every night, everybody in the house was already asleep. And this is interesting because in a different interview, she said that she was in charge of Dakota's homeschooling. And she even made a library for him with books and notebooks and pens and crayons, everything that you would need for school.
Was this before she got her job?
No,
like when she first moved in with them?
She just started changing her stories quite a bit between interviews. When Al was asked about where all of these school supplies supposedly were and what happened to all the stuff that Amanda had gotten for him, Al replied that Dakota destroyed them. She was also asked about the bruises and cuts on Dakota's feet, legs, face, and hands. And Amanda replied again, she never saw him, she never talked to him. So...
How does a 10-year-old destroy a library of books? Like, to the point where you can't find them? Would he burn them all in the middle of his closet that he's locked in? Like... What kind of stupid excuse?
They are stupid. They're very idiotic. The police asked her about the buckets of urine in the attic, and she said, no, those aren't buckets of urine. Those are for the leaks in the roof.
So the roof's leaking pee? Like, you think people can't tell the difference between urine and rainwater?
I know. That's what I mean. Idiotic responses. After the interviews were getting more and more intense, Amanda knew she couldn't hide this anymore, so she stopped talking and requested a lawyer. It came out later that Amanda and Jennifer would keep track of all the things Dakota would do wrong daily and report it all to Al so he could punish Dakota for all these, you know.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, it was all three of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just like little tattletales.
Right.
And they just got their satisfaction off of putting this kid in pain? Why do they hate him so much?
We've talked about these cases before, like you just said. For some reason, one person is targeted and turned into a non-human.
Maybe he did have some behavioral issues, but what the hell? You can't do this.
It's also suspected that Amanda knew that Dakota was dead before she even left the house that day, and just not really her problem. So now we're going to talk about Al's first interrogations, which are extremely hard to talk about. Worse than Amanda. So just one more disclaimer before we jump in. All Al had to talk about were his excuses for his son's behavior. Somehow it came up that Al was adopted and that he hadn't slept for 3 days. Just like...
So he's just trying to become the victim.
Yeah, he's just grasping at straws Al claimed that Dakota was acting strange and complaining that his stomach was hurting. It looked like Dakota's stomach was extended out. And Al said it must have been because he was eating his own, quote, shit. And he was trying to give him glasses of water to help. Really
So
strange.
The kid was starved and he's trying to blame him for it.
Now, Al said this about eating his own feces. We now know through other interrogations with Amanda and Jennifer, Al would force Dakota to eat his own feces. At some points, he'd put on rubber gloves and force it into his mouth. So he wasn't lying about that part, but saying that Dakota would do this on his own, it's just so disrespectful.
How did 3 adults all decide that we're going to participate in this torture?
Al went on to say that Dakota went into his room after he drank all this water. Al made him drink 8 glasses of water all at once. So when Dakota went into his room, he started jumping on his bed, which again is a dirty lawn chair, and started pissing and shitting all over.
8 glasses of water at once?
Yeah.
Like,
he then said that this was the usual for Dakota. He would just do this all the time. He checked on him later and saw that Dakota was sexually assaulting himself with a broken leg of a chair.
what?
Yeah, that's what he said. He told him to take the chair leg out of his anus, and when Dakota did, blood started squirting out everywhere.
So he's trying to blame Dakota for the damage to the anus because he put hot sauce on it, and who knows what else he did.
Well, he raped Dakota numerous times with the broken chair leg.
He did?
His father. So I guess he was just trying to make sure he covered that base with the story that his own son would do that to himself. He took Dakota down to the bathroom to clean him up, deciding it wasn't worth it to call the police because, again, this is the usual. This is like the day-to-day stuff that he dealt with his son. And Al also said Dakota was desperate to hurt himself, making the bruises all over his body. Al said that in his fatherly way to try to stop Dakota from hurting himself, he would whip him with a spatula.
I'm sick of hearing this guy's crap.
I'm not putting his interrogations in the outline because he is the perpetrator, not the victim. But I watched a lot, and it was infuriating hearing the way he would talk about it. It was terrible.
It gives insight into what actually happened because everything he says is just a cover-up to explain something he did.
But they don't make sense.
But the fact that so much of this info came from Amanda and what was her name?
Jennifer.
But it shows how much they knew.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't just keep track of what he was doing wrong throughout the day. They also were very much aware of the level of abuse.
Right. I just like him telling the investigator, no, I had to beat my son with a spatula because he wanted to hurt himself. How would that, even if that was true, that Dakota was trying to hurt himself, how would beating your son help combat that?
Right?
Combat that.
When people are suicidal or something, you don't beat it out of them.
Yeah.
You try to help them stay safe.
That's like telling somebody who cuts their arms that you're going to cut their arm for them to make them stop. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why he would try to use that as a excuse, but it really shows where we're at mentally and like his intelligence.
And even if it's true, even if he was hurting himself, look at the kind of life you're forcing him to live. Why wouldn't he be having behavioral issues or
Like his mom mentioned on the phone call to the 911 about him jumping out of a window.
Yeah.
That must have been out of pure desperation to leave or to end his life. One or the other, I would understand.
Yeah.
And those bad haircuts that the teachers mentioned earlier, Al owned up to that, saying he intentionally did that to teach his son a lesson from time to time.
Wow.
And the sexual abuse, that came up quite a bit in interrogations, and Al refused to say that he did it to Takoda, but instead Takoda would do that to himself, and Al wouldn't do that because he, quote, wasn't into that. He, quote, wasn't gay. Again, why would you say something like that?
He's a narcissist. And, you know, the kind of person that hurts other people, he doesn't care.
Right.
And he just wants to get off as light as possible for everything he did. Which, I mean, he had done so much up to this point. He shouldn't have even had the freedom to do this to this kid. But because so many things were ignored, like, there's so many people responsible for this. The 3 adults at the home and all the people that were aware of things going on at this house and didn't. I mean, the mom called before it was too late and pled with them to pull the kid aside, and now she's lost her son when it could have been prevented.
So, next, the investigators, they asked about that footage they wanted to see Dakota's terrible behavior that was a constant in this home. Remember those cameras? When Al was first asked about them, he said that they were fake. They were just to ward off trespassers. But later on, they saw them running, and they saw that the cameras were mostly from the attic. When Al was asked about it, he laughed. He said, "No, that would be embarrassing. What if my friend saw that?"
So that's all he's concerned about is his own reputation, not the safety of the kid.
Yeah. That would be embarrassing for me. That's what he used as an excuse.
Such a narcissist. Ugh.
Now, remember back to the story of what happened to Dakota. Al claimed that he tried to clean him up. He tried to give him a shower, forced him to drink more water. He sent him back up to his room for the night, thinking a good night's sleep would help. But then very early the next morning or that morning, he heard his son yell, "Dad, help!" And Al went up to the room and saw Dakota on the tarp, quote, tweaking out, shaking violently, and then no longer making noises.
I don't care what Al has to say, because none of it's true. None of it's 100% true. This is just his BS story to make himself look as good as possible.
He said he brought him downstairs. He washed him off again, which you already did. So, okay. When he realized that the boy wasn't responding, he finally called 911.
I don't think we need to talk about any more of Al's statement because it's worthless information.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it for what I have to say. Also, Dakota was naked at the time, and police asked, why does he not have clothes? And it was because he destroyed them constantly.
How? Does the kid have a fire pit in his closet? How could he destroy all this stuff?
Yeah. This guy is like the scum of the earth. I can't. There's nothing lower. The case went to a judge named Judge Adkins, and Judge Adkins said that the brutal facts surrounding this child's death amounted to, quote, the most horrific case of abuse and torture his court had ever seen. 32-year-old Al Uhatan McLean, pleaded guilty to one count each of murder, rape, and kidnapping, in addition to 3 counts of child endangerment. Judge Adkins told Al, What you did was pure evil. You provided no mercy to your son, and you deserve none from this court.
And took no responsibility.
Right.
Blamed everything on
Dakota, on the victim. So this year, 2021, they were finally sentenced. Al was sentenced to 51 years, life in prison, with the maximum amount of years that's possible for this case. So after 51 years, he can possibly be up for parole. If he ever gets out, he will have to register as a Tier 3 sexual predator and violent offender.
Dude, how old was he?
32. If he gets out, he'll be 83.
Why is that even an option?
I don't know. And it's like...
There should be no possibility for parole for this guy.
Even though if he did get out, at the earliest, he'd be 83 and a Tier 3 sexual predator, all that. It's still like, why would you even give him the shred of hope? Like,
some people in their 80s are in pretty good health still. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why they would give him any possibility to get out. Maybe it's the state that it was.
I don't know. It's really hard to choke down.
Like, this is one case where I'd be completely okay with the death penalty.
Yeah.
Because it's irrefutable and this guy is a menace to society.
Yeah.
I mean, leading up to this, there were so many other crimes he wasn't held accountable for.
Right.
Like, anyway, what about Amanda and whatever?
Well, Amanda, who was 30, pleaded guilty to charges including involuntary manslaughter and endangering a child. Yeah, like, no doubt you did.
That's
Same with
it?
Jennifer. This is so upsetting.
There was no, like, what's that called when you help facilitate a crime? Anyway.
She, in court, said, if I could, I would trade my life for his. Are you kidding me? You had years in that house.
Well, now that she's being held accountable.
Yeah.
Like, now that she's caught, now she would do it.
Judge Adkins, in response, told her, you are to blame in this case. You could have stopped this. So Amanda, her minimum sentence is 22 years in prison on the charges of involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment, and Jennifer got at least 8 years on the same offenses. No, Jennifer,
8?
If she's truly mentally, not there and it has so many issues, I guess you can understand that, but we don't really know to the extent of where she's at.
Yeah. And the other factor is that these women were living with Al.
Right.
A literal monster. And living through abuse is never an excuse to hurt another person. But I do think it's an important factor to think about, especially when talking about the sentences. I don't know why there's such a huge discrepancy between the two women.
Like, well, I think that's what I just said. Because
of the mental issues? Okay. I didn't know how much was going on there.
I don't either. That's what I'm speculating.
Well, I'm glad I wasn't the one who had to make the decisions. Or make the decisions.
But I think the judge, he truly felt for this child, and he tried.
It's clear from what he said, he was going to do as much as he could to hold these people accountable.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff, even if it sounds like it's not enough, it's defined by law,
Poor Robin said, I'm blaming myself a lot. I could have just gone down there and kidnapped him. I could have gone down there and did whatever I had to pull him aside and alert the authorities of what was going on. I was too scared I was going to go to jail, and I wish I could take that back. And how sad that she would have had to kidnap her own son, that she felt that was the only way, was to kidnap her son to save him.
Yeah, and you can't blame her for being afraid that she would go to jail, because like up to this point, the courts were so leveled against her.
Yeah.
Everything was being awarded to Al.
So that's.
But she she called and she begged them, like
she wrote the letters, and when she felt that she was being pressured and manipulated, she wrote the second letter.
oh my gosh.
It was there. She tried.
Yeah.
She made mistakes in her past, but she was trying.
And like, she didn't know the layout of the house. She didn't know where Dakota was. I mean, even if she would have gone there and tried to get him, she probably would have never gotten to him.
Yeah,
he was locked in the middle of a house with
the attic,
security cameras and all that.
Right.
Like, terrifying. Anyway, well, thank you, Rosie, for sharing that story.
Yeah, it was a really hard one to write. I had texted Ryan like a couple times while I was writing it, just saying like, this one's gonna mess me up. Like it just.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody does decide to watch the interrogation videos of Al McLean, I'm warning you now, you're going to be infuriated for hours. They are just.
It's a good thing to watch
really
like
intense.
before an intense workout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Martial arts or something.
Or if you need to go chop wood.
Yeah.
Or a fire. I don't know.
A punching bag.
It was a very difficult case to write.
Well, thanks again. And thank you all for listening. I won't say I hope you enjoyed this, because obviously it was terrible, but we want to be a voice for people that don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a while since we've done a story this
gruesome.
Yeah. About such a young kid, such a helpless situation.
Yeah.
Ugh. Although, we just talked about the Turpins again, and there's probably a lot of details that haven't, have yet to come out in the future, or may never come out, that might be pretty similar to this. Who knows? But
yeah, true.
Anyway, that's where we should wrap it up.
All right.
You have anything else to say?
Oh, no. Need a stiff one.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. Bye.